Okay, this is Geometry Honors Section 8-2, and we are going to do this differently than the way the book describes. We're not going to do it the way the book does it. So you need to look at this video and be able to do it the way that I'm showing you here, because we're doing it differently than the way the book is showing. Now, what we're going to use is we're going to use the ratios for a 45-45-90 and a 30-60-90 triangles. These are spatial right triangles. And so for a 45-45-90, the ratios for the three sides are 1 to 1 to square root of 2. That's a leg, and hypotenuse. So that's for every 45-45-90 triangle, it's going to have the ratio of a 1 to 1 to square root of 2. And then for the 30-60-90, we're going to talk about it here in a minute, and it has the ratios over here, 1 to square root of 3 to 2, and we'll deal with that in just a minute. We're going to do the 45-45-90 first. So here I have a problem. I have a 45-45-90 right triangle, so I'm going to be using these ratios. And you're looking at your diagram, and you're going to make up one side of your proportion is going to come from the diagram. Now, I'm going to just choose the X, and I'm going to put it on top, and then I'm going to put the 9 on the bottom. Now, you could put X9 on top and X on the bottom. It would not matter. But from the diagram, you get one of your fractions that are going to be in your ratio. Now, we've got in our proportion, you've got to know the sides. So I know that this opposite the right angle, that is going to be the hypotenuse. And then that means that this is a leg. And so what I have is hypotenuse over leg. And so that means then on this side, I need to put a hypotenuse over leg. And so this one came from the diagram. My other fraction over here is going to come from the ratios. And so since I have the hypotenuse on the top, which was my X on this side, I choose the square root of 2, which is the hypotenuse, and it goes on the top. And then the leg then, and it doesn't matter, each of them are 1, so the leg then would be 1. And so now I have formed a proportion. We have a proportion. This fraction came from the diagram, and like I said, it doesn't matter if you go X over 9 or you go 9 over X, it doesn't matter. So one fraction comes from the diagram. Your other fraction that is going to be equal to comes from your ratios, and you just have to stay consistent on both sides. I went hypotenuse over leg, so that means I had to go hypotenuse over leg on this side. And so that set up my proportion, and now I can cross multiply. X times 1 is X, and 9 times square root of 2 is 9 square root of 2, and I have my answer. So the hypotenuse would be 9 square root of 2. Now, this is a 45-45-90, so if this leg is 9, then that leg over here would also be 9, because any 45-45-90 is going to be an isosceles triangle. So if you know one leg, you know the other. This would be 9. And so we had to find the hypotenuse, and we found it. Again, one of your fractions comes from the diagram. I chose X over 9. And then on the other one, I chose then square root of 2 over 1. It comes from your ratios. So one fraction from the diagram, one fraction from your ratios to set up your proportion. Just make sure you stay consistent. Hypotenuse over leg, hypotenuse over leg. Now, if I would have went 9 over X, it would have been leg over hypotenuse, 9 over X. Then over here, it would have been leg over hypotenuse. It would have been 1 over square root of 2. Either way, you're still going to get the same answer because you're dealing with a proportion. And so that's for the 45-45-90 triangles. Now, for the 30-60-90, we have a ratio of 1, which is the short leg. Square root of 3 is the long leg, and 2 then is your hypotenuse. So this is the ratios for a 30, 60, 90. Every 30, 60, 90 triangle has these three ratios. Now, we've got to know which side is the short side. Well, wherever your 30-degree angle is, opposite that will be the short side. And then wherever your 60 is, opposite it is the long side. And then opposite the right angle always is going to be your hypotenuse. So this side is hypotenuse. This is the long leg. I'll call this long leg, so I'll just put LL. This is short leg, opposite the 30, so this is SL. So now I know my sides. This is the short side, this is the long side, and this is the hypotenuse. Now, we need to find, there's two variables in this particular problem. We have an X and we have a Y, and we need to find both of those. So to find X, again, one of our fractions is going to come from the diagram. So here I'm going to choose X over, and then the number, the side that they're giving me then is the hypotenuse is 22. So X over 22, and so that is short leg over hypotenuse. And so that means over here I need a ratio of short leg over hypotenuse. And so again, this fraction came from the diagram, then this one has to come from my ratios. The short leg is 1, so that would be on top. The hypotenuse is 2, so that would be on bottom. Now I have my proportion, and I cross multiply and solve. So 2 times x is 2x, equals 22 times 1 is 22. We divide by 2, and we get x equals 11. And so I found my x. Now I need to find my y, and so I'm going to have to set up another proportion. And in this case, I'm going to choose then, again, one of your fractions comes from the diagram, and so I've got to find y. Y over 22 equals, then, like I said, this was one fraction comes from your diagram. This is the long leg over the hypotenuse. So over here, I need long leg over hypotenuse. We have to stay consistent. And so this ratio comes from our ratios here. This fraction comes from these ratios. So the long leg would be square root of 3. And the hypotenuse would be 2. And so again, now I have my proportion. And so one fraction on this side came from my diagram, y over 22. And this side, this fraction came from your ratios. And again, you just have to stay consistent on both sides. Long leg over hypotenuse, long leg over hypotenuse. And then, since we have a proportion, we cross multiply and solve. 2y equals 22 square root of 3. And then we're going to divide both sides by 2. And we get y equals 11 square root of 3. And so now I found my y. So setting up proportions is what we're doing. And just always remember that one of your fractions, all right, comes from your diagram, and your other fraction comes from your ratios. And the same thing over here, I got one of my fractions from the diagram, I got one of the fractions then from my ratios. And remember to always stay consistent on both sides. All right, and so again, we're not using the method that they're using in the book. We're going to use the ratios for a 45, 45, 90 and the ratios for 30, 60, 90. And we're going to set up proportions and then cross multiply and solve.